We are live.
All right. Well, welcome everybody to the April 5th meeting of the Asheville Urban Forestry Commission. My name is Amy Smith. I'm the chair. We will kick it off with introductions, introducing first our commission members. So I'll just call around as I see you all on my screen to introduce yourselves. So Ed.
Ed Macy, Urban Forestry Commission.
All right, thank you. And Zoe?
Zoe Hoyle, Urban Forest Commission.
Thank you. Patrick?
Patrick Gilbert, Urban Forestry Commission.
And Perrin?
Perrin Dion, UFC.
Thank you. And Sharon?
Sharon Summerall, UFC, TRC representative.
All right, thank you. And Dawn Chavez, our vice chair, is absent. She's sick today. And as of right now, Cecil Bothwell has not yet joined us. But we do have a quorum, so we'll keep going. So introductions from city staff. Haley?
I'm Haley Mahoney. I'm a planning technician with Development Services and staff assistant with the Urban Forestry Commission.
Thank you. Nancy?
Hi, Nancy Watford, Stormwater Supervisor, Development Services Department, and staff liaison to Urban Forestry Commission.
Thank you. And I see Tyler Kelly is here.
Tyler Kelly, planning technician. I'm with Development Services as well.
Thank you. And Laura, CPM?
Hi, I'm Laura Sepian with the city's Capital Projects Department.
Thank you. Vidila?
Hi, Vidila Sadik with Planning and Urban Design, Long Range Planning.
Thank you. Ben?
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Ben Woody, Development Services Department.
Thank you. And Monty?
Hey, it's Monty Clampett, Site Inspection Supervisor for Development Services Department.
Thank you. And Mark?
Hi there, Mark Foster, City of Asheville Public Works, City Arborist.
Thanks. Did I miss anyone? I think that's it. Our group here today. All right. Next, we need approval of the minutes. The minutes for the previous meeting were linked in today's document, so hopefully everybody had a chance to look at those. Are there any corrections? And if not, we need a motion to approve.
So move.
And a second? Yes, I can second, right? I can second, right? Okay, Zoe's got it. Thank you. So I'll do a roll call vote just down my list here. So I have Ed.
Aye.
Sharon.
Aye.
Zoe.
Aye.
Perrin.
Aye.
And Patrick.
Aye.
And I vote aye. So the minutes from the last meeting are approved. Did we get any public comment?
We did not get any prior to the meeting. Let me see if we have anybody on the line. Get any prior to the meeting? Let me see if we have anybody on the line. Get any prior to the meeting? We have no callers on the line.
Okay, thank you. So next we have a couple of presentations. First up is Laura with Capital Projects. Give us a brief update on the Vermont Avenue project. So Laura.
Thank you so much. Just wanted to update the commission that we had gone last Wednesday, that would be March 30th, on a field walk to reassess the health of each tree on Vermont Avenue within the project limits. The project limits, just to remind everyone, is between Haywood Road to just south of Olney Road. In other words, the area where we have existing sidewalk. The group on the field walk last week consisted of the city's arborist, members of the Urban Forestry Commission, and members from the city's Capital Projects Department, and also a representative from the city's design consultant. Now, we had originally conducted an assessment about 2.5 years ago, so obviously it was time to reassess the trees on Vermont Avenue. The assessment considers various factors, including rating each of the trees' health for both its live crown or canopy, as well as its structural condition. And then, there's other factors like site conditions and sidewalk considerations, such as the ability to meet ADA requirements. And certainly we would also consider that resident thoughts and their desires to keep trees and the ability for easements. Now, I just want to make it clear that we conducted the walk, but the assessment is not yet finalized. But I can generally, before we get it finalized, say that trees will fall into one of three recommendation categories: either to keep them, remove them, or evaluate them further. And just to maybe backtrack here for a second and remind everyone that the Urban Forestry Commission overall recommends keeping as many healthy trees as possible. And the definition of a healthy tree is defined as a tree in fair or better condition. Certainly, there are a lot of stakeholders involved in this process, so it's a little bit complicated. And just to very briefly go into a little bit of detail about the process. If any trees are determined to be invasive species, dead, dying, not healthy, or otherwise not able to keep, then that would be the first level of evaluation. And for that, we defer to the expert, meaning the city arborist. Other factors after that then would be employed to determine if it's possible to keep the tree. And then the final step would be replanting, to put together a replanting plan, calculate the removed versus proposed planting canopy to make sure that we're meeting the city's zero net loss goals. And for that step, the city is going to request help from the Urban Forestry Commission to look all that information over, help with the calculation and the replanting plan. Excuse me, I'm having some technical difficulties with my microphone and earpieces here. So that was pretty much it. I just wanted to make that update that we have this activity going on, and just let you know. And do you have any questions? Yes.
Thank you, Laura. It looks like we have a couple questions. So if any commissioners have questions, you can do the hand raise. So Perrin, go ahead.
Ms. Seppian, I just didn't hear one of the things you said. I think you were defining what a healthy tree is. Did you give a definition of what a healthy tree is?
A healthy tree is a tree that's considered in fair or better condition.
Fair or better. That was the word I missed. Okay, great.
Yeah. Thanks for asking and making that clarification. I see we have more questions. Ed?
Yeah, thank you. My question is, if your evaluation also included considerations towards maintenance to improve the condition of trees that might otherwise be in poor condition.
Such as removal of dead limbs or things of that nature?
Yeah, there's a whole array of best management practices that Mark is very familiar with that could take a tree that's in fair condition and improve its condition, or remove risk, structural support systems, things like that.
Yeah, we did mention that when we finish with construction, we want to make sure that the project is complete and there are no activities of that nature that the contractor didn't complete that we would then leave for the city to come back in. We wanted to leave a fine completed project. Is that what you were getting at?
Not really. Trees can be managed and their condition can be improved with management practices. And so my question was, as you were evaluating them, did you have a column for maybe improving the tree's condition with a management practice, or not?
Not.
Okay.
Patrick?
Yeah, who from the UFC accompanied you on this walkthrough evaluation?
Amy was there for about the first third or so, and then Sharon was there the entire time.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, Sharon. Question?
Hey, Laura.
Hi.
To respond to Ed, we looked at each tree and considering the age of most of these trees, we took everything into evaluation. What had to be removed to make it ADA compliant, how much root structure would be lost because it had been bowed up, where the new sidewalk would go in, looking at the top of the canopy of how much dieback there was and if there was any pruning. And we sat and we spent, I don't know, Mark, how long did we spend? 4, 5 hours going through about 20 trees. So considering the age of the trees, there's just a huge amount of problems with most of them. But, and we talked with the neighbors who we talk with a lot. And some of them know that their tree outside their front door is dead. And others just, even though it's old and it may not survive the construction, want to save the tree no matter what and are willing to give up some right of way to move the sidewalk. So there was a discussion with the engineer to make it a sidewalk that's not the normal straight sidewalk that goes down, but they're willing to elevate up over the roots and they're willing to move over on the property. So there was a whole lot of discussion about each tree, how to make it viable if we could possibly save it. And some of them, there was just no way. I mean, and it's unfortunate because some of them have been in the ground so long that new trees need to go in. And then some of them are a lot younger. So we spent a lot of time, I believe, on each tree looking at all the problems of it. Mark had that little pointy thing that he used in for the cavities and all the holes to tell us how deep they were. And so anyway, that was my take on it.
Thank you, Sharon. I appreciate you elaborating on that. Hey, Mark.
Hey, Laura. And to Ed's point, have you had the opportunity to walk that street and look at all the trees in the same manner, Ed?
Yes, I have. And I agree with what everybody's saying. It's a pretty rough situation.
Right. And so as far as, best management practices for the trees that are, the red maples that were planted more recently, not actually with, city approval or anything, but that were planted more recently, they're in the kind of condition where, BMPs might do some good. The sugar maples that have been there since the 19 teens, growing in a 2-foot wide planting strip, they're so far gone that there's, you could try magic or something, but I don't really know that standard BMPs would do a whole lot to keep them going along. And so I have to agree with Sharon that most of those trees are, if we're trying to do a thorough job of, having a usable infrastructure and trees that we can look forward to living a long time, we can't really put our faith in the older sugar maples.
Karen?
So Sharon, you mentioned the possibility was discussed of elevated sidewalks. So I guess I'm curious to know from you as well as from Ms. Seppian, to what extent that's been considered and whether or not that can be incorporated into the plan in order to save some of the trees?
Yeah, I was pleasantly surprised with our engineer. They're willing to work and go to the extra length it's going to take in order to build over these. I mean, some of these roots are sticking up, I'm going to say a foot out of the sidewalk.
Yeah, that's true.
And can those be elevated over? No. But the ones that are less, like 6 inches or more, yes. And can some of them be moved over? I was pleasantly surprised that the engineer was willing to work with the state of the trees that could possibly be labeled fair, and as opposed to the ones that were lower than fair. So there's going to be every effort made to work with these trees that are existing as can be. The neighbors want them, and and they're beautiful trees, but the construction alone to put a new sidewalk in is, and as we all know, you're doing root damage on these sidewalks. I said, if you don't come out with a small crew and hand chisel around these roots, these trees will be dead, and you won't know a tree will be dead until 2 years after you do the work on it. Mm-hmm. And they're willing to come out with crews and hand dig around some of these trees and move them over. So when they said that, I was relieved that it wasn't going to be a slash and burn method. But it's going to be a difficult decision all the way around due to costs, because we all know that costs money. But and they'll spend that money where they feel that they can save the tree an extra how many years ever it will take. So, I mean, there was a lot of compromise and discussion in that walkthrough. I don't know if that answers your question, but.
Yeah. And when we're talking about elevated sidewalks, are you talking about like a wooden structure up and over?
That would be be determined. And I just want to make it clear, Karen, that we have very limited space to work in. We only have 7 feet of right of way. You've got the tree taking up, you know, a good portion of that, then 4 feet of sidewalk. And so first of all, we may need easements from each property owner that would be affected. And then we have all the ADA requirements. And if we cannot meet the ADA requirements, and that would be for sloping the sidewalk up and over the roots, for example, then also being able to meet other features like folks' driveways, you know, because the people will be walking across their driveways and then maybe over tree roots and things of that nature. And so we cannot go over the recommended ADA slopes for that as well. So there are a lot of moving parts, I guess you could say, that we would have to look at and fit together in order to make this work. But as Sharon said, we're willing to look into that on the ones that we can save.
Makes sense. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
All right, doesn't look like it. Thank you so much, Laura. And I did want to say that as far as the Urban Forestry Commission, in my experience and time here, this is so far just been a really pleasant process. The idea that we can work together with the city staff and try to be this, you know, however we can help, a go-between perhaps between the residents in the city and providing our expertise. So I really, really appreciate that. And I hope that this can be a template for moving forward. So thank you.
And myself, just want to say that Amy and Ed and Sharon have been an invaluable resource to help us, you know, figure out this process, because we are kind of moving forward here on a new process. So I appreciate that help and support as well.
All right. Well, thank you for the update.
Okay, thanks, folks. I have another meeting. I appreciate you.
Thank you so
Bye
much.
now.
All right. So then next we have a presentation on the landscape subcommittee portion of the open space task force, and Vidila has some information for us there.
Hi, everybody. I will walk through presentation. Ed, did you want to say anything before I get going?
Not particularly. You can go ahead.
Okay. Ed has been kind of a key stakeholder in this process. So to remind you, this is about proposed landscaping changes, primarily in section 711.3. We're also proposing some changes to other sections that are slightly related to this, and I won't go into those because it's more of the minutia. Let me start by reminding everybody how we got here. We had an open space task force that was reviewing an idea in whether to require a new open space requirement in downtown. And the consensus was to not do that, and instead to improve tree planting standards in general. And so we created a new task force to review that. And it has developed into more of a review of citywide landscaping standards, not just the downtown. So what are the two problems that we're trying to address primarily? One it's severely limited in compacted soils, which reduce the growth of trees and their lifespan. And the second problem is a really poor process for landscaping installations, so that even when we have the best designs from the best landscape architects, if they're installed improperly, it doesn't matter, the trees don't grow. So I have some images to walk through these problems a little bit. These are some images of trees in the city. Some are planted young and already dying. Others you can see are planted in compacted soils with gravel around. Others are not planted properly, and they're already expanding up and out of their area. And this is why primarily we have so many poorly planted trees. This is a typical process in development citywide. You have a site that is graded, then all kinds of machinery roll gravel over it to compact it because they need to prepare surfaces for a hard surface below so that they last long and don't crack. And at the end of the day, what you get is, this is a parking lot example where a planter then, after all that, landscape crew comes back and digs a hole for a tree. Typically, it's just enough to get the root ball in. And seeing the rest of the process, you can understand that there is no viable soil for that tree to survive. Because trees, as you all know, need uncompacted soil. In nature, there are spaces between particles in the ground, but we intentionally compact them to make them more resilient for our pavements. And that's a problem. Here are a few examples from Google Earth. This is on Patton Avenue near Goodwill. And you can see in a difference of 9 years in the parking lot, you don't see much of a change in the trees. I call out one tree on the edge here that's planted in closer to the native soils, and you can see that there's quite a bit of growth that happens there. No surprise. This is just the south side of the Earthgate parking lot. Same situation. We have landscaping requirements that require significant numbers of trees. I think what this highlights is that the theory doesn't matter so much. It's more about what's on the ground, how they're actually planted, and how much soil they're actually getting. More is not necessarily better, and that's what we're addressing in some of these landscaping proposed changes. This is Haywood Street in downtown. Just to highlight a very urban sidewalk condition. You can see these trees effectively haven't changed in 11 years. And then on East Tunnel Road, trees that are immediately adjacent to more green area. One might think, well, they have access to green, but remembering the slide showing compaction of an entire site, when this site was developed, the entire thing was graded. So grass may grow relatively well, but that soil around all that grass near these trees is still heavily compacted. There is a shifting focus in the industry that acknowledges that as you get more soil, on the bottom you see the number of cubic feet of soil for a tree. There is a corresponding increase in projected canopy and trunk diameter. Again, not really a surprise. And Asheville's current practice is in this lower realm. We actually have, believe it or not, a lot of us didn't even know this. We in the downtown, we actually have on the books a standard for 300 cubic feet of soil per tree. That really hasn't been implemented much, if at all. But for the rest of the city, we don't have a minimum soil volume standard. So this is where we are today. And what we're talking about in discussions with this working group on landscaping and with the city staff and others is to make a requirement that begins at 300 cubic feet and goes up. potentially to 1,000 cubic feet in certain parts of the city under certain circumstances. So this brings us to the proposed solutions. And again, the two key solutions in the changes are establishing a minimum uncompacted soil volume requirement and establishing third-party landscaping inspection. So what are we talking about for uncompacted soil requirements? The consideration is still up in the air. I can say that we are talking between 300 cubic feet and 1,000 cubic feet, and potentially making a different standard for the downtown than we have for outside of the CBD, because we've got a lot of concern that the increased amount of utilities and infrastructure and buildings in proximity to where trees are planted potentially means that we shouldn't expect to have as much soil. And that would mean that we accept that trees are not going to, grow for as big and live as long. And so this is a balance that we're trying to make right now, and sort of still in process. So I don't think it's very helpful to get into details, but to let you know, I think the big move is that we're moving in this direction, and I think we've been making some good progress on that. In addition, I'll just talk about a couple of questions here is what are the capital costs impacts to the city when we have our own projects, or a property owner? Are they reasonable? What are maintenance and operating expenses and issues, and the impacts on parking? So I'll leave it at that. The second part is establishing a third-party inspection process. I think a lot of you have seen this slide before. And what we're trying to highlight here is that we currently have a process for driveways that we want to replicate for landscaping, which is that you can't get an approval to pour the concrete for your driveway apron until an inspector comes out and verifies that you've prepared it properly, because we want to make sure it doesn't crack. And so the idea is that we would implement the same thing for landscaping, that there would be an external, in this case, it wouldn't be a city inspector, it would be an external agent that a property owner or developer would have to agree to pay and to include in a process to review the site before construction, during construction, and during the plantings, and then post implementation. And they would have a lot of different things that they would sort of check off to make sure that have been done correctly. Primarily that the soil volumes have been met and that the soil is uncompacted through pressure rod tests and other means of verification. So those are the two big ticket items in what we're proposing. And I want to mention two other considerations that are pretty big, and they're related. One is proposing to remove building impact landscaping. These images show partially why building impact doesn't work well, especially as we go toward a more urban form. The way building impact works is that you have to provide trees depending on how big your building is. So as your building increases in size, you're required to plant more trees. But as your building increases, you lose space for trees. So it really works against itself and is a problem. And we believe with the recently adopted tree canopy preservation and other landscaping standards, they are sufficient, and that this is just not wise. Another change is that we're proposing to reduce parking lot. I heard a question coming up. Do we want to answer questions first, or I have two more slides?
It's up to you. If you want to just finish, that'd be fine.
Okay. Another suggestion is to reduce parking lot trees. We currently require one tree for every 1,500 square feet of vehicle use area, and we're suggesting to cut that in half, one tree per 3,000. It's because through the analysis, we've realized that it's just too many trees. And again, this is if we have fewer trees, those trees have more access to soil, leading to better overall canopy. So on the left here, I'm just showing you, this is an example from a downtown project that hasn't been built yet. But in the bright green are the vehicle use trees. There are 30 trees. And on the right, you're seeing, this is just conceptual, sort of me showing you what 15 trees would look like. And in this next slide, what you're seeing is what those trees will look like if they reach the lower end of their canopy. These are London plane trees. And in there are black outlines showing their approximate area of the soil volume, assuming a 3-foot depth of soil. So again, this is trying to hit home, I think, something that may be counterintuitive, that is sometimes less trees or a reduced quantity, but a higher quality can lead to a better result. And that's what we're proposing. And there are plenty of other changes we're making, but these are the biggest ones. So I'll leave it at that and we'll go from there.
All right, thanks, Vidila. So I'll just go ahead and I guess call on people for you, but it looked like Ed had a hand up first, then Patrick.
Yeah, thank you. Vidila left out one important fact about removing building impact trees, and that's that we also agreed in doing that we're increasing the canopy requirement in the canopy amendment. Just for those of you that might have concern that we're going with less trees and not more, that may be the case because quality really going, not quantity, but we are increasing the canopy requirements on these sites as well.
Would that be for all sites or just certain?
That's right, and that's what we've been talking about. Yeah, we're suggesting to not change anything in downtown, but to increase for the other zones. And that's another thing where we're still working on. We need to hone in on specific details and get more buy-in on the exact numbers. But the idea is that in making these other reductions, we could potentially increase tree canopy preservation so that it balances a little bit.
All right, thank you. Patrick?
Yeah, I have 2 questions. One has to do with the soil volume, and the second has to do with the third-party inspector. And on the first question, I'd like for both Vidila and Ed to answer to provide an answer. But I thought that the task force was talking about 1,000 cubic feet of soil per tree everywhere. And then I saw some recent emails where some people were questioning whether that was viable in the downtown area, and was suggesting the 300 cubic feet of soil volume. So I'm wondering if in the downtown area, if the amount of soil volume is reduced from what was originally proposed, would the use of civil cells help in terms of the growth and long-term maintenance of trees in the downtown area?
I'll start on that. So the actual where we will ultimately land is going to vary, I think, depending on the location. Currently, we're talking about having a different standard in the downtown from outside of the CBD. That makes the standard more difficult to implement and manage. And I think we would all prefer, we're trying to move in a direction to keep the code simple. And this doesn't do that by having more standards, but it may be the direction we're going. And if that happens, there will be 2 different standards. In addition, we're talking about separating out a requirement for trees that are planted individually versus those that are planted in groups, because it's understood that when trees share soil, they exchange nutrients, and they don't require as much per tree. So, for example, if the standard is 1,000 cubic feet for one tree on its own, it may be 750 cubic feet per tree when they're shared. So that would be 1,500 cubic feet for two trees. So there's a lot of nuance, I think, that we're talking about. So it's hard to say specifically one number. And silvicels or any other product would be allowed to be used in any of this, and we would likely see them, because that's the only way that you can really attain these volumes in urban conditions.
Ed, do you want to also answer that?
I think Vidila gave a good answer. What he's not telling you that I can tell you is that he's receiving some pretty strong pushback from the city on these soil volume standards, particularly in the CBD. So he's done a pretty good job of trying to walk that balance beam between what the committee's recommending and what the city wants. And it's I give the committee a lot of credit for pushing back that, you know, we do need a good soil volume standard, but I do understand the pressure that Vidila is getting, and it's all based on cost. But you know, our point is, if you're not going to grow a tree, a healthy tree, then you're wasting your money anyway. So that should be a cost consideration as well. So we'll just see where we end up with this.
And let me add that I'm meeting with other cities that have implemented minimum soil volume standards in the next couple weeks, and I think, you know, how that goes will, I think, help to allay some concerns and help city staff, particularly, to get a better sense of what the impacts may be, and I think that should help.
Okay, thank you.
That sounds
On
really
the
good.
third party,
Oh, sorry.
pardon? On the third party
Sorry, I forgot you had a second question. So go ahead.
on the third party inspection, Vidila, you said that if the property owner agrees to pay for the third party inspection, what happens if they don't?
That was a misspoke. It wouldn't be an option. This would be a new standard.
Okay. All right.
A new requirement. I guess I was trying to say that it would be required third-party inspection, and we have similar process with stormwater.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Sharon was next.
Thanks for the report, Vidila. I'm in agreement with the parking lot landscaping trees. And in my experience on maintaining parking lot trees, which would go into conjunction with the recommended species list, is that we would focus on canopy trees. That would be the reduction. I'm finding like a lot of zelcovias and columnar trees are being planted, and they don't offer any shade, not a lot of shade, where a good broad a canopy tree would be better, so that we would tie in with recommended, if we're going to reduce the amount of trees, that we have good canopy trees and not so many columnar or trees that tend to keep smaller canopy, because I'm familiar with taking care of parking lot trees, and I'm in total agreement with that. And I think we all are, that have done any shopping in any center around town can see what they look like. I have never been, when we did urban centers in reduction of building impact, according to, and removing them, we can fee in lieu out of 719, our tree canopy protection. You cannot fee in lieu your way out of building impact. And we don't have the documentation yet of how much canopy are we actually losing into fee in lieu. We're getting the percentages of how much is being put, but we're not taking in account to how much is being removed. And that's kind of a up in the air percentage that we're trying to figure out. And so I would never be in approval of, just due to the heat island effect of these centers and these buildings do, and getting rid of building impact, just for simply the fact that you can't fee and lieu your way out of a building impact.
Let me respond to those. For the recommended parking trees, for a while we were talking specifically about having a new column in the master's species list that would identify whether it's an allowable parking lot tree. I recall we went away from that, but that may be a good thing to keep in there. I've heard, for example, I've seen a lot of river birch in parking lots, and apparently they do well because of their soil. They do well in I guess crummy conditions, but they don't provide a lot of canopy. So that was one response I heard that didn't make a lot of sense to me. It survives well in bad conditions, so let's keep it on the list. But if we're moving in a direction with better soils, let's make sure that the trees that are planted there actually take advantage and give us the long-term benefit that we want. So for that, I think maybe you're right. And Ed and Patrick, let's think about adding that back on the list of to-dos. For building impact, what I would suggest to help this conversation is maybe at a future meeting when we get a better agreement from the city on what we can make, how we can change tree canopy preservation, I can come back to you and show you various projects. This is what the total tree impact would look like when we reduce parking lot trees by half, when we cut out building impact potentially, and then we increase tree canopy preservation, what it looks like on a percentage basis, and then knowing that we're effectively making the standards more onerous by requiring a lot more site work for soil volumes. And then I think this discussion will be easier to have because we'll have more information.
Thank you. All right, thank you. Mark? Oh, sorry, Ed, go ahead. Sure.
Yeah, I wanted to just make a comment on this particular thread before we hear Mark's question. I was not aware that you could not fee in lieu building impact trees. And I think that's something the committee is going to have to talk about because, I think getting rid of the building impact trees is conditioned on increasing the canopy requirement. If that doesn't happen, then that's a real game changer, number one. And number two, we should probably establish a minimum canopy requirement that cannot be fee in lieu in lieu of building impact requirements. Does that make any sense? That we have to have some kind of bar where we get that minimum canopy anyway. So it's something that the committee is going to have to talk about.
Wait, so you're suggesting that regardless of fee in lieu across the board, that any site would be required to have a minimum canopy?
Yeah, or something like builders cannot fee in lieu more than 75% of the requirement or something, or 50% of the requirement.
Okay, yeah.
Or some standards so that we get those trees. Yeah, we don't need to get into the weeds now, but we need to talk about it. I wasn't aware that you couldn't fee in lieu building impact. That's a good point, Sharon. Thank you.
Okay, good. Anyone else? Okay, Mark, go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to respond to the assertion that city staff's only opposition to making silvocels or equivalent an across-the-board standard for CBD tree planting was all due to cost. Granted, the $10,000 or more per tree pit cost of using silvocels is certainly substantial. And if you were trying to apply that across the board, not just for the big hotels where they have, lots of money to spend on fantastic, Cadillac tree pits and where the option exists for them now to do so. But if you have some little mom and pop shop where they're required to put a tree out front, spending an extra $10,000 to $20,000 so they can have a tree, that's putting them under a great deal of pressure as they're trying to start a new business. The likelihood of its success is already, against them with an entrepreneur. But stepping aside from the cost, anybody who has experience with just how little space there is underneath sidewalks in Asheville knows how unlikely it's going to be able to fully implement having suspended sidewalks as the standard downtown. Vidilla has brought to the commission's attention how narrow sidewalks are in this city versus cities that don't even have trees in sidewalks that width.
That's a great point, Mark. Just to fill everybody in on this, and this could be a separate conversation, that 60%, more than 60% of the downtown sidewalks are 8 feet wide or less. In other cities, that standard means that they don't get a tree because they want to have room for people. I don't think we want to say that 60% of our downtown will not have trees because where we are and we've dealt with this, we can meet the minimum ADA requirements, which is a 4 feet clear on an 8-foot sidewalk, but less than that, we really can't. So we are under very constrained situations that other cities aren't.
Right, and so having some sidewalks that are narrow, some that are medium, some that are wide, building the right thing in the right place is what we have available to us, And so a one-size-fits-all solution that's at the Cadillac end of the spectrum is not something that can be universally applied here. But having that option available for where it works, that's fantastic. It's great that opportunity exists.
Thank you, Mark. Anyone have anything else to add? Obviously, I think we all agree that the CBD has its own challenges, and I think that the approach of treating it somewhat differently makes sense because of that. So it sounds like that part's taking place. My 2 cents is to have fewer drivable streets downtown. I think we should have a pedestrian mall, but I got a chance to say it. So, okay, Patrick, go ahead.
Well, I would certainly support a pedestrian mall, but I think my question is, can a tree survive in the downtown area with just 300 cubic feet of soil? Without any
Most trees have a lot less than that.
Pardon?
Most trees in downtown have a lot less than that.
Okay, but can a tree still survive with only 300 cubic feet of soil? That's the answer I'm looking for.
Can it survive? I think the question would be for how long, because
But the whole purpose of this is changing the standards so that trees that are planted can survive as long as their natural lifespan. So understanding all the issues involved in having downtown trees in the downtown area, if we're going to plant trees in 300 cubic feet of soil, and that's not enough to bring them through their entire lifespan, then we're not really meeting the objective of this, the overall objective of this task force.
Well, I guess I'm no tree expert by any means. What I've learned in this process is that all urban trees do not live as long as trees do in the forest. That's not even true, right? Depending on the tree. But the more soil volume that we give them, the better they do, assuming they also get water and things. So I think anything we do to move in a direction of greater uncompacted soils is moving in a good direction. And we want to move toward the ideal soil volume for large trees, which is understood to be 1,000 or 1,200 cubic feet. We want to move as close to that as we can.
All right. Just for time's sake, I'm wondering if this should be further discussed in the task group. Amy, I'll defer to you.
Yeah, I was about to say that. I think that was all the questions. So, yeah, unless there's something quick. But I do appreciate the update, Vidila, and as well as Ed and Patrick's work on that subcommittee. So we'll keep that going and keep us posted as a group as progress is made. All right. So next on the agenda are staff reports. Mark, did you have anything to add? You guys can read his report here, but anything else going on?
Oh, it's just been a busy time with wind and snow and rainstorms. My guys just kept a white pine from falling down this morning that wanted to embrace the earth. And so
Kept it from falling down. How? What kind of mitigation?
removing it.
Oh.
It was uprooting.
That kind. Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah. I'm sorry if I come across as so grouchy as a tree lover here, but it's kind of like being a cop. My interactions with trees, I too often encounter them behaving badly rather than behaving well. You know, I don't always just get to enjoy their benefits. I have to put up with their attempts to squish things. So, yeah.
Thank you. All right. Well, thank you. Sharon?
Hey, Mark. I think I asked you this 2 years ago, and I can't remember the question. Do we bring in an outside consultant to treat the borer, the emerald ash borer? Or
no, you're looking at the guy who's been treating city trees for emerald ash borer. I'm the plant healthcare section, and probably getting some more help from Parks and Rec is something that I should try to solicit from them, since they're almost always on park properties rather than in rights of way.
Are you doing injection?
No, I've been doing soil drench.
Oh,
I can't
soil
afford. We've had some pro bono treatments of trees in Kenilworth Park and I think one other park over in West Asheville, where the trees were injected, and you know that's wonderful, but it's also not affordable for me on my annual budget cycles. Either dinotefuran or imidacloprid is more affordable, and it's delivered by drench, or by with dinotefuran I can do a bark spray, and I just have to get it onto the tree a little earlier in the process than you would with emamectin.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, that's about a year process systemically with your drench as opposed to a contact application. So are you seeing
Year process? How do you mean?
Yeah, to kill the larva with just a soil drench by the time it gets up into the.
It doesn't take a year to get up in there. Is that what you mean? Or?
Yeah, I mean,
No,
other
no.
than a contact spray on it, isn't it taking that long on the mature trees? No, it's not taking that long.
The soil drench is going to take you about a month or
Oh, is
so
that all?
for the material to get up, and it'll be a little faster than that with bark spray, and faster still with injections. So
Right.
basically, it boils down to how much time have you got in your treatment, you know, in the life cycle of the insect, and where you start your treatment. If you start farther back, then you can use the slower chemicals. If you are waiting until closer, you know, then you're going to have to use the faster
I'm
uptake
glad to,
materials.
yeah, I'm glad to hear it's only taking that short a period of time. So
Mm-hmm.
things have stepped up since.
But yeah, and I was actually surprised that some of the trees that were injected, they didn't look really qualitatively better than the trees that had, you know, the soil drench. I was expecting them to look better, and you know, they're not. So, but anyway, I'll take whatever help I can get, whether it's pro bono or other
Right.
departments or just my own efforts.
Right. Yeah, thank you.
All right. Thanks, Sharon. Karen, another question?
Mark, would you be willing to type in the names of those treatments into the chat, just so we have have that. I couldn't sound it out while you were saying it.
Okay. Yeah, that's not a problem. I may or may not spell it correctly the first time either.
And I'm sure we can get it to you too if you want to email Mark as well, if it doesn't come through in the chat.
Thanks.
All right. Next is the Tree Canopy Protection Ordinance report. What we're currently getting for canopy planted, preserved, and feed-in lieu paid, you all can see on the table. Not much change. It's just been little projects so far. Any questions on the table before I get to the next item having to do with our updated metrics? All right, which does bring us to old business. And the first thing I put on here was to discuss that. So I know that we had asked, created sort of a wish list of metrics to see what we could get in relation to the tree canopy protection ordinance. And I just wanted to let everybody know that's on me. I haven't typed it up to send it out to get input on that, but it is has made its way to the top of my to-do list. So look for that first through the commission. I'll seek your feedback, and then we'll put that through to the city staff as a wish list and see what else we can get. But anything else on that? All right. Next item is working group updates. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, it says here that chat is not enabled or is not available at the moment.
Right. Sorry. It's because we're not supposed to use the chat feature because we're in an open public meeting.
Gotcha. Okay. Well,
We
then
can get
I'll send some email.
But yeah.
Okay.
We can get that. Okay. Thank you. All right. Working group updates. So policy working group, Ed, want to update us on chapter 20? And we just got the update on the other group.
Yeah. Not much to report on chapter 20. I sent Nancy an email a month ago, maybe, or a couple of weeks ago, asking for a chance for the committee to sit down with the city and talk about our recommended revision. And haven't heard back from you, Nancy. I hate to put you on the spot, but
Right. Because
probably 3 weeks ago or so.
yeah, I know. Chris was supposed to respond to you.
Okay.
Well, the bottom line
so
is,
I don't have.
yeah. Well, I have something to report then, because I thought Chris had shared this with you. But the staff doesn't have capacity to take on chapter 20 right now and chapter 20 revisions. It's not like y'all are an advisory group, and as a reminder, you don't direct work. So this is an example of when you have directed additional staff work and we just don't have the capacity, to be honest. Like if we did, we'd try and work it in, but we don't. We have too many people out and various other things. But then that's the other part of that is that if it does need to go, then part of this process is to make a recommendation that then goes to council that gets this on Deborah's list to get it built into our workload.
All right. Thanks, Nancy. Did everybody catch that?
Yeah. Question.
Can I report to that? We've been recommending a revision to chapter 20 for well over a year, and the committee has actually revised chapter 20 for you. All the city has to do is review it and then either accept our changes or not. But that chapter is so darn obsolete, it's almost worthless at this point. And so you're saying that we have to make the recommendation to city council that we revise chapter 20 so that.
Yes, that's how the process works.
Just so that it can get into the workflow. Yeah. So I totally understand the frustration, but it does make sense that, city staff has, just like any other business, their year of work planned out. And so we need to get it in as something that's planned into the workflow. So far, city staff has been really amicable in working with us in all of our little things that we ask them to help us with. And I totally, obviously you can have your own opinion on how that process should work, but that's what they're asking us to do with this right now. So go ahead, Ed, if you had one more comment on
No, I thought the city was already engaged with this on this revision. I appreciate everybody's time. It's valuable. So is our time, and we put a lot of work into it. It's time that I can't afford to take, and just have it thrown out. So I'm pretty upset about this. So if you can let us know what the process is to get the city engaged, I would appreciate it.
What we need to do right now is make a recommendation. We can either do it verbally right now. I move that we recommend to city council this, this, and this. Or if we want to write it up more formally beforehand, like we sometimes do when we sort of have a plan for something like that, we can do that and do it at a future meeting. So those are kind of our two options. But it's just a way to formalize the request. And I see Kim Roney's here. She can jump in if I'm incorrect in any of this. It's a way to formalize the request. It puts it through not only city council, but the city manager so that it can trickle back down. And it does feel roundabout because we did all this work already. And so far, city staff has been really super helpful in working with us in that direction. But they're asking us to come around the other way on this one.
Okay.
I agree with your assessment, Amy. I hear staff making a suggestion for a recommendation, and it does formalize the work. Now, with that recommendation, as your liaison, I'll carry forward any recommendations that you make to council. Then a majority of council at minimum would need to instruct the city manager, which would then gauge capacity with staff, just like we saw with our strategic priorities at the council retreat. And we may come back and hear the exact same answer, which is that we lack the capacity to address it. But this is a way to approach it from both sides.
All right. Ed, you still have the floor if you have anything else.
Yeah, I wish we were told a year ago before we put all this work into it that our work was for naught. So if we make a recommendation, I think we should make a formal written recommendation that the city consider looking at the revision that we've submitted to Chapter 20, just to save the staff time, rather than starting from scratch.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's have the rest of the discussion. So I'm going to go ahead and go with Patrick.
So is this a new process that's been put in place?
Absolutely not. We were doing it wrong before. It is very clear in all of the city handbooks that the commission members cannot direct city staff work. Again, up to this point, they've been like flexible with us, with they can also solicit our help and ask us, to help them with something that's already on their workload. Does that make sense? And that was probably more the case with the tree canopy protection ordinance. They were going to work on it anyway. Am I getting this wrong? But something like that, they can solicit our help. But us asking them to say, hey, this is what we want when they're not prepared or, have it on their schedule is the difference.
Well, even going back, and I don't want to put him on the spot, but even going back a year ago when we first brought this up, I remember Eric Edgerton saying, yes, this particular ordinance is so obsolete that it needs to be completely revised. So
correct, but that's still not city having time to do it. It's been on the table since I started on the commission. Shannon Tuck was telling us that she was planning and working on an ordinance revision in 2018. But that doesn't mean that it's something that's on the actual workload and goals for city staff. Does that make sense? And I'm just trying to kind of advocate again at this point for the city, because this is what they're asking us to do.
So, yeah, I understand, but, going back to the point where Ed and I took a lot of time to go through and revise Chapter 20, everybody knew what we were doing. Everybody understood at that point that the process would be to then give this over to the city all I had to do is review it. Nobody said anything then. So I'm like Ed. This is like being sucker punched with something that we could have been told a long time ago.
Got
And
it.
that's why
I'll go ahead and give Ben a chance to address that as he has his hand up.
Sharon, do you want to go first, or do you want me to go ahead? I think you had, okay.
Yes, please. Yeah, thank you. So I don't interrupt you, which I'll probably do. This went back to Public Works, working with Greg Schuler and asking to, when I first started at UFC, to work on Chapter 20. That was the first rewrite we needed to do, and we were asked to participate in that. And I'm just going to say we have a failure to communicate, and all the way around. And I understand what city staff is going through, but I concur with Ed and Patrick and myself. We have spent many, many, many hours on this, way back when, from 4 years ago, to be told that there's a new process. Yes, there is a new process. And yes, staff is overworked. But again, what's happening now is there's shakes up with boards and commissions, and they're redefining what we do and what we don't do. And we're feeling the trickle down theory of what that looks like. And I'm extremely irritated about it. So that's all I'm going to say. I understand it. I know why it's happening, but it's completely annoying of all the hours and time of work that everybody's put in to do on Chapter 20. And it is a good, viable rewrite that doesn't need any editing at all, unless there's something that needs to be done on the backside that Ben would know about. So yeah, I'm extremely annoyed. So thank you, Ben, for letting me go and say that.
Thank you. So I'm going to step back a little bit from the conversation. Nancy's kind of in a difficult position because, and I'm just going to be real straight, Chris was supposed to reach out to the subcommittee and have a conversation, and I doubt Nancy was even prepared to talk about it today. So you kind of drew the short straw on that, Nancy. But I'll say this. There does need to be edits to it, Sharon. So there are this, we will need to propose some changes back to the group that worked on. I'll go ahead and tell you that. It may be the better way to approach this is it's not, I'm okay with, I think we should do it. I think that somebody said earlier, and Eric said this, that Chapter 20 is super dated. It needs to be updated. 100% agree with everybody on that. So I would rather say, let's not drop it. And I know Councilman Roney's on here and there's processes, but I'd still like to kind of keep it on the radar because there has been a lot of energy put into it. But I'll say this, we need a little bit of time. We're drowning in DSD right now with a lot of things. And maybe that's a better way to approach it rather than just hit the complete reset button. Can we get a little time? It's spring, it's our busiest time of the year. We got a lot going on. Multiple departments are involved. So I just need us to step back and maybe have a conversation after this meeting with the subcommittee to talk about timing. Maybe instead of just blowing the whole thing up on this phone call, let's have a conversation about setting maybe a realistic time frame for doing this.
Well, that makes a lot of sense.
That's what I'm offering right now on the spot.
Yeah. Go ahead, Kim.
So based on what I'm hearing, there's an option to make a recommendation to council to instruct staff to add capacity, or what Ben is saying is by taking time to maybe make that written formal recommendation that Ed mentioned, bring that to the next meeting. Would that be enough time to then reach out to the subcommittee and make sure that this group is informed of the process, has the support, but also understands the staff capacity that could be included in the recommendation?
I don't know what that question's for, but that makes sense to me.
Questions for maybe Ben and the UFC. Is that?
And, I think what I'm hearing from Ben is it might be something that, perhaps even next fall we pick back up. It'll really depend on capacity. I agree with you that that's a separate recommendation where we could say, hey, maybe there's not enough capacity to begin with. I think our recommendation should really focus on the need for the revision of the ordinance, personally. But I'll hear from the policy working group on how, I don't think, we're not going to get rid of the policy working group as a commission. It's just so everybody knows. I mean, that we can have a working group on whatever we want, but we do want to value our own time and, you know, make sure that we're spending our time on things that will be beneficial and be completed. So I'll pass it back to the policy working group on how you want to proceed in this moment, listening to what Ben had to say and the potential to create a recommendation. So Patrick.
Well, I don't specifically want to speak for Ed, but I would take Ben up on his suggestion for the chapter 20. But I think we had also requested a preliminary meeting to discuss some additional changes to 719. Where would this process affect that as well?
So I think, Ben, that was for you. We're assuming that capacity would obviously limit that discussion as well.
Yeah, I mean, it probably does. I'm just not prepared. Patrick, I'd like to schedule a time to sit down with the policy working group and try to figure this out. I don't know the answer to that off the top of my head, Patrick. I just know that I just want to value the work that you've done, Patrick and Sharon. So, like, I understand that, and I certainly don't want to leave this meeting today with that all just being pushed to the side. But I'll just repeat: we need to, as a department and working with you, we need to build some probably greater structure around how we undertake projects and build timelines for those, and just a little more formality. I guess that's what I'm asking. And Kim, I appreciate your support. Councilman Roney, I appreciate your support on this, and I just would like to have a conversation with the policy working group to talk about this a little more.
That's fair enough. Thank you, Ben.
All right. Thank you, Patrick. Ed?
Yeah, no, that's fair. I think that, you know, if we circle back and have a conversation, that's great. And I don't disagree with there having to be a need for structure. I completely understand that. It's just, you know, changing our process midstream that I find really difficult, especially since we've invested time. As for Chapter 19, I consider that a process that is still in progress. When we adopted the Canopy Amendment, we all agreed that we'd revisit it after a year or so to fix some bugs and make some tweaks. And we're at that point now. So, you know, again, if we're going to change direction, we at least need to know about it so we can learn how to function more effectively and efficiently. And thanks, Nancy, for having to carry the bad news. I know it's not your fault, but that was a tough place to be.
All right, thanks, Ed. So it sounds like next step would be a meeting with probably just Ben and whoever he wants to invite from his side. Let me know if there's any assistance needed in setting up something like that, and feel free to include me in that meeting. All right, and then we can talk as well in the policy working group. I think if we want to create a recommendation to City Council to adopt Chapter 20, that it will probably come out of your working group. But again, touch base with me if you want to discuss that.
Okay, I think you're part of the policy working group, aren't you not?
Am I? I don't think I'm
Yes.
on that. I am?
Yes.
Oh, good. Well then, oh, you're right, because I'm not on the budget one because that one had too many. Well, then include me, please. Sorry. I just want to, we're avoiding the quorum by having me on all the working groups, obviously. So yes, loop me in and we'll get that going. All right. Anything else on that one? We already had an update on the standards and specs and design manual. Ed, anything else? Okay.
Yep.
Next working group is the budget request working group. I had Ed on there too. I will, if it's okay, Ed, start with a little bit of background work. Just right this week, I've gotten a request for one meeting with City Council, and I have a draft meeting request to send out to the other City Council members to set up the one-on-one meetings. So just to update everybody, nothing set yet, but I am working on that. So if anybody else wants to fill in, that's all I know right now is that it's in process, but I don't have any details. Go ahead, Patrick.
So I'm just going on the Citizen Times article that the newspaper did about the, I think it was the council budget working group session, and the council priorities that the city council has tentatively laid out. And picking apart those priorities, at least according to the article, it said that there would be some a priority given to urban forestry. And so I was, and my question could be both to Ben and to Kim, whether that can be translated into budget support for an urban forester.
I'm happy to jump in here if that feels appropriate. So we retained from our council budget retreat the 2 strategic priorities from 2021 of reparations and reimagining public safety. New priorities include equitable, affordable housing and stability, homelessness, neighborhood resilience, and improved and expanded core services. So having brought neighborhood resilience to the table during the retreat, I was seated with my colleagues, Councilwoman Turner and Vice Mayor Smith. The action items I included under neighborhood resilience would be the Climate Justice Initiative, resource mapping, and the Urban Forestry Master Plan and staffing, as well as food systems and security, stormwater mitigation, and a few other things. So I will add that the next step of this is the city managers were going to review the council's strategic priorities with staff, gauge capacity, and communicate next steps, which will include a budget impact. And our next budget meeting is going to be on April 12th. So next Tuesday, a week from today. So whether or not it means that it is secured in the budget process is yet to be determined. But it is on the table as an action item underneath neighborhood resiliency, which is how I got it to be even considered at the retreat, is my perspective. That is not the opinion of the full council. It is my opinion, which is why I sent it to you as a liaison report from my desk.
Thank you. So does that make sense to everybody? As we continue our engagement with city council members, really focusing in on that priority, city council priority of neighborhood resiliency. That's where we can put our request, but in the context of climate, generally speaking, stormwater, but really focusing in on that urban forestry piece for us. Sharon?
Hey, Kim, I missed, is the budget meeting before the council meeting? I missed the email on that somewhere.
Yes, it is scheduled for 2:30. It will be in person at the Harrah's Cherokee Civic Center.
Okay, thank you.
And just a note that the budget work sessions do not have an element of public engagement already woven into them. Right. So it is certainly welcome for folks to come and bear witness, to participate in the process of giving feedback, either by reaching out directly, whether it's email or phone calls, or by making comments in the council meeting later that evening. But there is not a public comment period in our budget work sessions.
Thank you.
All right. And as far as the budget request, I've been emailing city council members during their budget retreats. I'll probably do it again, just as a concerned citizen, while they're in budget discussions, really highlighting our request. And so I encourage everybody to do that as well. As individual citizens, you're free to email all the city council members as well. So, and their emails are very easy to find on the city website. Anything else there? Hopefully next month we'll have an update.
Yeah,
Okay.
I would just say, because it is named as a top 6 council priority, I would just say extend gratitude and come from a place of assuming support as you're making the case for urban forestry master plan and the staffing to support it.
Perfect. Thank you for the tip. All right. Oh yeah, I was gonna say hopefully next month we'll have an update on having meetings with some of the city council members. All right. Next item is the fee and lieu working group. And Ed and Zoe and I had a chance to meet a couple weeks ago. We set up a couple of goals and priorities for, let's see, first one was the fee and lieu. We also met as the Urban Forest Master Plan Working Group, but with the fee and lieu group, our discussions were, how are we going to set up, and we've talked about this before, generally speaking, but what would the framework look like for decision making in terms of how this money would be spent? Now, it's not our money, but how would we recommend to the city that they prioritize the spending of fee and lieu money? Obviously, it's intended to replace tree canopy where it was purchased out of a project, but that can take on many different ideas and frameworks, whether it's planting a specific site or enhancing street trees or parks, or potentially purchasing land to preserve as some sort of canopied green space. Now, what we kind of came up against is, so what happens next? So say we do have a recommendation for a parcel of land or a planting project. How do we initiate that? Where does it go? And what we have on the table right now as a tool that we can use are recommendations to city council, as we've been talking about. So if there's any discussion on fee and lieu, feel free to raise your hand. But the working group put together one recommendation to start off. In our discussion, we really focused in on the downtown area, the most urban area, as a place where the greatest need exists because of development and loss of tree canopy. It's been highlighted in all the studies that we're aware of with Canopy and Heat Island. There is a parcel downtown, sometimes known as the Ravenscroft Reserve or Collier Street Project, that is has many large maturing trees, is not developed, and there have been citizen groups recommending the purchase of that property as a preservation. So as a committee, we initiate some help for a recommendation to city council to purchase or recommend at least exploring the support of purchasing this parcel as preservation. So before I read the recommendation, go ahead, Sharon, quick question.
Are we going to have discussion on this? I got a couple questions.
Yeah, I was thinking I'd go ahead and read it, and then we can discuss it before we vote.
Okay.
So here's the recommendation. I'll go ahead and read it. It is included in the agenda items for this month. So this is a draft recommendation from the Urban Forestry Commission to City Council for the City of Asheville to use fee and lieu funds from both the Tree Canopy Protection Ordinance and Open Space Ordinance towards the purchase of the forested property located at 11 Collier Avenue in the South Slope as urban forest land acquisition. Whereas our urban forest provides a multitude of environmental benefits, including improving air quality, water quality, and soil quality, reducing stormwater runoff, erosion, sedimentation, and flooding, providing shade, evaporative cooling, and a diversity of habitats for wildlife and pollinators, reducing ambient air temperature as much as 20 degrees in the summer months. And whereas our urban forest provides a multitude of social and public health benefits that include reducing heat-related illness, reducing illnesses such as asthma, attention deficit disorder, and obesity, reducing the length of hospital stays, reducing noise pollution, reducing stress, and reducing exposure to harmful UV rays. And whereas our urban forest provides a multitude of economic benefits, including improving retail and tourist environments, increasing property values, decreasing stormwater treatment costs, reducing energy consumption and electricity costs. And whereas Asheville's urban forest sequesters 65,000 tons of carbon each year, valued at $3 million per year, and reduces stormwater runoff by 18 million gallons a year, along with providing shading and evaporative cooling, strongly contributing to Asheville's energy transition goals and climate resilience. And whereas an urban forest canopy analysis commissioned by the City of Asheville and the Urban Forestry Commission documented a canopy loss of 6.4%, or 891 acres of trees over a 10-year period. This is an area larger than Central Park in New York City, with a subsequent loss of environmental, social, and economic benefits and values. And a NASA study documented a substantial ongoing spike in the urban heat island effect, particularly in areas with marginalized communities. And whereas it is critically important to reverse this trend to provide a healthy environment and environmental equity, to make Asheville as climate resilient as possible, and to provide for a sustainable future. And whereas the Asheville City Council has adopted a tree protection amendment to the city's Unified Development Code, Section 719.1, which is a canopy-based ordinance that gives developers and builders the flexibility to both build and protect trees, provides incentives to save trees on development projects, and provides for active planting and on-site tree protection and replacement. And whereas large, mature, established trees such as oaks, maples, elms, and poplars provide significantly more ecosystem services than young, newly planted trees in an urban environment. And whereas intact stands of mature trees in urban areas, such as the stand of 24 mature red oak trees located at 11 Collier Avenue in Asheville's South Slope neighborhood, are rare and irreplaceable. And whereas the City of Asheville determined land acquisition as one of the intended uses of the Tree Canopy Protection Ordinance Amendments fee and lieu funds, now therefore be it resolved that the City Council of the City of Asheville, will prioritize the acquisition of land for the conservation of trees in the Central Business District, utilize the funds generated from the Tree Canopy Protection Ordinance Amendments fee and lieu funds to acquire the property located at 11 Collier Avenue, Asheville, North Carolina, 28801, for the purpose of permanently protecting this parcel of undeveloped urban forest, utilize the funds generated from the Open Space Ordinance fee and lieu funds to acquire the property located at 11 Collier Avenue, Asheville, North Carolina, 28801, for the purpose of permanently protecting this parcel of undeveloped urban forest. So that's the recommendation that we would like to put to City Council. So I will open it up for comments and questions. Sharon?
Okay, so before I even got involved in the Urban Forestry Commission, I met Inga and Imkes, and I've been supportive of this. So I am supportive, but I got a couple of questions to the committee. When we present this, have we thought about who's going to do maintenance on this?
This recommendation is only to put it on the table. It's actually not, it doesn't even say who will own it, what purpose it'll serve, if it's a park or just a preserve. We just want to make, basically it's sort of like forcing the hand of how are we going to make this decision-making process by focusing on this one parcel as opportunity.
Right. So when we go to submit this to say, I'm not familiar with I'm only familiar with going to council with presenting this live and having questions. We accept it, but then we've got everything on the backstory of it, which is, are we looking at changing the open space ordinance fee and lieu to work within this acquisition, because that has a whole different statement and a whole different application. I mean, if we looked at the nuances of it, does it matter, the nuances?
In my opinion, no. Because if you look at, there's not funding in the tree fee and lieu either. It's just to initiate the conversation, because the city has a lot of things they could do, and we're not forcing any of them. You know, are they going to set it up with a nonprofit, you know, and fund the nonprofit to do the purchase, for example? Are they going to purchase it themselves and own it as a park? Are they going to? So we're not dictating or even asking for any specific outcome other than long-term preservation.
Do you think there'll be, when we submit things like this, questions like that, or is this just expected in this type of recommendation. I mean,
yeah, I would expect there would be questions, but again, we can discuss this if this is premature, but the goal here is to open that discussion, because nobody has on the city side set up any process. We have these funds coming in and there is no process. So we're trying to sort of initiate what could those processes look like.
okay.
But I like the questions. They're really good. So let's take the other discussion if you think of more.
Okay. Thank you.
No problem. Patrick?
Has the city rescinded its moratorium on spending open space fee in lieu funding?
Not that I know of. And, if that's the hang up, we can take the open space piece out of this and only focus on the tree canopy portion. We just included that to, again, initiate the conversation that these funds are intended to help. It just seems like the perfect opportunity. There's so few downtown places where there are anything at all to preserve. And this is one that is available. Go ahead, Ed.
Yeah, I think you've answered most of the questions very well. The whole idea is to put this on the table and to tell City Council that this is a priority, and it's an appropriate use of both open space and fee in lieu funds or canopy funds. If one thing I'm not clear about is if the open space exemption for CBD is in place or not, or because the open space money has to be spent in proximity of where it was taken. So that may create an issue, but I don't know. We probably have to do more research on that. The other thing is what kind of shape or form this thing could take would require some exploration on the city's part. And I think there are partners that would be willing to help with that from the nonprofit sector, and that there's also some private funds that the city could leverage for the purchase of this land. So it just makes a lot of sense to make this a priority.
All right, thanks. Sharon?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, open
So,
space.
Oh, sorry, Sharon, hold on. Ed, if you had one more thing, did you get cut off?
Well, I was going to make a motion that we accept this recommendation, but Sharon has more to say, I think.
Okay, go ahead, Sharon.
Yeah. Open space, where it's going now, we're waiting on that lawsuit, right? And however that forms. And then it's going to need to be rewritten for sure. And if we can do that within a text amendment, then this is a perfect opportunity to do so. If our new iteration of boards and commission, how we exist, and we have that opportunity to do so, or some board and commission does. So I'm thinking that we throw the whole kitchen sink at them and say, this is what we want. And then this is what we'd like to see, and then hone it down. And I'm in agreement with you as it gets more formalization. So that therefore they see the big picture and see the whole thing and see that open space will probably be changed more than likely, and that they can think more thoroughly on our fee in lieu on 719. So I think this is good.
And hopefully the intention in here is clear that our goal was to start the conversation at a minimum. All this money is being collected for a purpose, and we recommend that a high priority be this parcel to be acquired. So that's the intention. So Ed, if you want to make a motion, I think now would be okay, unless there's more.
I move that the Urban Forestry Commission accept this recommendation, or approve this recommendation as written.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Oh, Patrick got in there first as a second. Any other questions or discussion before we vote? All right, then we'll take a roll call vote, starting with Ed.
Aye.
Sharon?
Aye.
Zoe?
Aye.
Perrin? Patrick?
Aye.
And I vote aye. So the motion passes. We will submit the recommendation via our council liaison to bring to City Council as a recommendation to at least explore the options of purchasing this specific parcel at 11 Collier Avenue. And go ahead, Perrin.
Just to clarify, and to confirm that we just voted to approve the resolution as written, as it appears on the agenda, correct?
We didn't take any revisions.
Thank you.
That's correct. Thank you. And I will just, as a side note for anyone listening, say that the Urban Forestry Commission would be happy to assist with processes and discussions around that, and see where we can go with it. So, all right. Next item on the agenda is the Urban Forest Master Plan Working Group. And again, that was Ed and Zoe and myself. With that working group, we set a goal for the working group to be, so whether or not we are approved for funding for an urban forest master plan. So if it's a yes, then what would the next steps look like? How could we help the city proceed with the plan? Or if the funding is not approved, what background work could we as a commission do to further that process, even in the absence of funding for the next calendar year? So that was the approach we took. And we decided that our goal will be to draft a RFP, sort of a call for proposals. What would that look like? Because the RFP would outline what would we expect in an urban forest master plan? What would the pieces be? What would the general scope of work be? So that's where the working group is, and nothing else to report right now. That was it. We kind of set out that priority. We're going to work on that in the background. But did anyone have any questions for that working group, or anyone in the working group have other comments? No, we're good. All right, we will update you as we work through that. We're hoping, obviously, that the funding is approved and we're just helping, but if not, we'll proceed on the other route. All right. Next in old business is the rules and procedures update. Has everyone had a chance to look at that document? We've had it floating around for a while. A little bit of yes, a little bit of no. Sharon says no. My goal would be, part of this may end up not meaning much if the boards and commissions are restructured, but we don't know how long that process might take. So we have to assume that we're going to just keep going. So I would say a goal would be to have everyone take a look at that by the next meeting. All right. And it's a Google Doc. You can add comments and suggestions right into the document. Then we can meet back up and finalize and formalize it and have a vote. So we'll hope for that for May. Yeah, Perrin, go ahead.
Amy, I thought this might be worth discussing live. There's just one thing that stood out to me. Article 5, voting. So this is Article 5A. And it says if you're at the meeting and you don't manage to vote, then that's counted as an affirmative vote. It stood out to me. I've never seen that rule before, and I wonder why affirmative as opposed to negative, or why isn't it counted as an abstention? So I just thought maybe this would be something we could quickly discuss. Is that the best way to count a non-vote as a yes vote? Is that what we want?
It's a good question. Now, I will say that most of this document was pulled from, I think it's NC State, or one of the universities. Nancy's laughing at me. I probably got it wrong.
It's the UNC School of Government. They actually provided a draft of this.
Thank you. The UNC people are going to be on my case about that. Yeah.
For local governments, for us to utilize
so
in
it was-
our for our public meetings.
Perfect. So it was a draft created through their legal studies department. Yeah. So that's where it came from. We didn't choose that, but we do have the opportunity to discuss and revise it if we want another option. So
okay, I'll just suggest that typically what I'm accustomed to is if someone doesn't vote, it's sort of counted as an abstention. And that makes more sense to me. It's like kind of like a stand aside. So that's what I would suggest.
all right. Patrick.
Yeah, on that point, for city councils, for county commissioners, and boards and commissions, state law doesn't allow for an abstention vote unless a member is recused under the North Carolina recusal law. So
okay. Then I think that it makes more sense to count it as a no vote than to count a non-vote as a yes vote.
I'll let Eric raise his hand and jump in on this. Go ahead, Eric.
Sure. Yeah, it's just a statutory requirement. If a member of a public body doesn't vote, they're required to be counted as a yes vote. So it just mirrors the statute on that point.
So that might be something we're actually should not change then. Got it. Does that make sense, Karen? If it's
I can withdraw my
okay. Coming from above, we won't change that one. All right. But good question and way to get into the detail. That's what we're looking for in a read through on that and bring those questions. And hopefully again, next month, maybe we can have a chance to vote on that. All right. Last on old business is the boards and commissions restructuring. There's not much new right now as far as if you've been tracking the process. The city council is setting up a working group to work on this. So you can have a chance to join that, I believe still. They're also, Haley or Nancy sent out an email that was the last update from the city where you have a chance to sign up for email updates to make sure you stay in the loop on the process. So I encourage everybody to do that. I did request to be on the working group for the working groups. So I'll keep you posted when that kicks off if I hear anything that helps this group. Sharon, go ahead.
Yeah, I did as well. I
Okay,
signed up to be on the working group. So I didn't know if there were anybody else, but I'm glad to see you signed up as well.
Yeah, I figure I'll stay as involved as I can be in the
Me
process. All right, Perrin?
I just wanted to share my observation from the workshop that I went to on board restructuring that a lot of my input and feedback was just sort of pointing out UFC's experiences and UFC's contributions to city policy debates. And at the end of it, Councilperson Whistler mentioned, hey, I see a lot of comments about the work that UFC does. I just want to let you know, we're not coming after you, number one, because you're UFC. Number two, we understand that there's a lot of differences between the different boards and commissions. There's a lot of diversity in terms of what's happening out there, and we can consider modifying this to the gist of it was like she was saying, like, we can tailor this to the circumstances of different boards and commissions. So I just want to encourage Sharon and Amy, as you're participating, maybe keeping that line up of like, okay, this might be an issue for others, but here's what we do. That might be a good way to sort of defend UFC and suggest that an exception potentially be made for us to continue operating.
That's good to know. Thank you. We'll keep you posted as much as we can. Anybody, anything else on that? All right, new business. First is the steep slope ordinance. We just want to revise this and have a brief discussion. Patrick, did you want to kick us off there?
Well, yes and no. Because of this latest news about this new process that we have to undertake, I'm not sure where this is going to go, but just for the purpose of our own internal discussion, we have from time to time have had issues come before us where property owners have cut down trees on steep slopes and either illegally or didn't get the permit or didn't follow the permit that they were issued. And there was a recent case in East Asheville where I assume it was a new property owner in a new house cut down some trees on a steep slope. And I brought that to attention to some of the members of the UFC. And while it was interesting because some people said that the slope there didn't meet the requirement that a property owner would have to get a permit. However, the property owner thought that the slope was steep enough that they actually built a temporary deck, temporary steps going down the slope with railings to another landing, presumably so they could get to access to the trees and have them cut down. So it just led me to think that we should start some kind of discussion about looking at the steep slope ordinance and seeing if there's any room, both rationally and legally, to make some modifications so we can save as many trees being cut down on steep slopes as possible, not only in terms of saving the trees, but in terms of improving stormwater management. So I'll just leave it there and see what the other commission members think about it, whether we form another working group to explore this more in depth. But I assume if we go that route, then at some point we're going to have to make a request to the city to assign staff time to work on this. So if there is potential modifications to ordinances, we can get that process started.
All right. Any questions for Patrick, or anyone have comments on the idea of at least visiting or revisiting the steep slope ordinance? Go ahead, Sharon.
I'm always in favor of revisiting steep slope ordinance. I think if we have to make any additions to it, that we make very little, minimal. I mean, we have to pick a point height-wise. I think our point is percentage of slope as opposed to height. I think that's more indicative of our problems. And I think with staff's issue of so much to do, that if we can revisit just percentage changes as opposed to height changes on A and B, that may be a better tweak, for the lack of a better word, so that we don't have to reinvent it, because it does need to be looked at, and we can relook at it as we determined with the statute I sent. It can be revisited. Whether it'll be looked at with our current state of staff, I don't know, but I'm all
we can do whatever work we want to in the background. One thing that's always concerned me about it is it's not very clear what a private citizen needs to do or provide to have an alternative. You know, as we know with the project we worked on a couple of years ago on Sunset Mountain, you know, there was a homeowner that was very engaged and went the extra mile to do a landscape plan and engage us, but it's not well laid out on what those requirements might be or could be or should be. So I would agree with revisiting it to see if we can make it not just better, but, you know, more helpful both for the homeowner and the city, you know, to make things more clear.
Right. It also ties in with our grading permit issue, where you can clear cut but you can't take the stumps out, because the stumps out, you can't grade over 300 square feet. Then that's you have to have a grading permit, but you can clear cut with just leaving the stumps in. So there's that issue tied into steep slope. So we've got different ordinances that tie into each other that if it was all put into one area, then everybody could know exactly took me a long time to find out our grading permit qualifications. So yes, I agree with you, Amy, on that.
Again, as a group, we can work on it knowing that, it may not be any kind of immediate change, but we can work on it. Patrick, go ahead.
So is it appropriate to make a motion to direct the commission chair to create a special working group on steep slope changes?
We can, but I was going to maybe propose, since it sounds like the people interested are already in the policy working group and it's a policy, or it's an ordinance, would we want to add it and we can discuss it as part of that group?
Ed?
Since Ed's in that group, you have buy-in there, or?
Yeah, I'm a little hesitant to take on anything until we know what our processes are and whether the time is well spent. Sorry if I sound a little grouchy about that, but
not a problem. Let's start with that. Sorry. Then we have a delay. You go ahead.
No, I was going to. Yeah, having said that, I think that the steep slope ordinance would probably be the easiest one to tweak.
Well, then I guess then we'll put that on the agenda when we meet with Ben.
Okay.
Is that agreeable?
That sounds good.
Okay.
Yeah, Sharon.
Yes.
Am I on that policy
Yes.
group? Okay. Thank you.
And as always, if we get to any final point, we will solicit the entire commission for feedback and input. All right. Anything else there? Thanks, Patrick, for bringing it up.
Thanks to you, Madam Chair, and to the rest of the commission members.
Thank you. All right. Last item on new business. It's not really much to report here, but I did want to circle back because I believe it was Patrick that alerted us to some tree trimming in the Hog Creek neighborhood along Beverly Road and Arco Road, sort of the area by that retail sector at the intersection there. It was Duke Energy's subcontractors did tree trimming. That was pretty ugly. The neighborhood was alerted. We were alerted. Ed and I went out and walked the site and took some pictures. I sent that up to Public Works, the city arborist, and Development Services. And two things I found out, Ed, later. The chop that was left on the bank on Beverly Road, the homeowner wanted that to remain there. I think it was Beverly Road, and Mark can clarify for me. So part of the debris and slash that was left was actually at the request of the property owner. Now the stuff there's like a drainage area by Arco Road with a bunch of stumps and twigs left that could potentially clog the drainage ditch there. But again, I didn't get nobody in Public Works came back with any sort of concern about the issue. So, Mark, do you have anything to add? No, Patrick?
Sorry, I'm getting my mic turned on. I was on another page looking at GIS.
Okay.
Let me go back over to that map. I was looking at the corner of Arco and trying to see whose land that is.
Yeah, that very corner. I don't know if that's the private property or if there's a section that's part of just the road right of way.
Right, and for some reason GIS is moving really slow. Oh, hang on, it's Avon, not Arco. That's why.
Oh, pardon me. Sorry, you're right.
Yeah, there's the Mulvey property is right there. And there's some road right of way for Beverly and Arco. So it's possible the drainage might be within right of way, but I haven't had a surveyed or anything to find out for sure.
Okay.
But if it is something that can plug up the drainage, then our stormwater people may well be interested in it. They take a look at it and see if it bothers them.
Okay. Well, we sent it to him. Go ahead, Patrick.
So yeah, this has been a problem that we've discussed as long as I've been on the commission. And originally, when Duke Energy was sending on a somewhat regular basis a representative to the commission meetings, we would bring up issues about the tree trimming projects to, and I forget the gentleman's name, and he would then take it back and have discussions with the subcontractors, come back and report. Let the subcontractors know that of the complaints and trying to work this out with subcontractors. And that was 3 years ago, and we're still getting complaints. So I don't know whether it would be worthwhile to actually contact Duke Energy again and strongly request that they send somebody to a future meeting so that we can discuss this again and see if we can get some kind of resolution to this issue, because it's just been ongoing.
I suspect it'll always be ongoing, but I do also think that having, it's written into the ordinance that they have a standing seat on the commission. So it is worth pursuing that membership piece and facilitating that communication. So I'm making myself a note to follow up on that, because I don't think that hurts anybody to have more communication and an opportunity to meet and discuss. So Duke Energy. Anybody else have thoughts on that? I mean, I agree. It's written in that they're in there for a reason. But.
Yeah, I've advocated in the past for keeping them a member of the board. And I remember that wasn't necessarily a popular or supported sentiment when I made the recommendation. So winds of change.
Well, we always want them to participate. It's mostly that they don't, and we get real frustrated and want to kick them off. But I think obviously participation would be the preference. So
right. Well, to speak to their pruning, I would definitely love to see better final pruning cuts. I mean, that's understanding as somebody who works storms, how much a tree will move under ice load, snow load, rain, wind, that kind of thing. You need clearance, and that clearance may be ugly, and that clearance, may whatever, but the final pruning cut being made so that the tree can compartmentalize that wound and close it over, that's what I'd love to see. But also, I understand that the tools they're using are not hand tools. It's not, a climber's chainsaw. It's a chainsaw on a stick being used by somebody who is trying to work in the proximity of power lines. It's an insulated chainsaw on a stick. And getting at the right angle with a 8-foot pole to be able to make that right pruning cut and it not kick back and wound the tree, further, it's fairly awkward and tricky business. It's not residential arboriculture. But once that clearance pruning is made, whoever owns the tree, if they have the capacity, they can then have somebody who is, an ISA certified arborist come along and safely make those final pruning cuts, because now the clearance is there. And so there's not going to be a problem with OSHA compliance, But the folks that are pruning for the power company, they are trying to get down that circuit and cover ground. They're not being paid for ornamental pruning. So that has to be understood in all this, and it's never going to look pretty, but it keeps the lights on.
Right. Well, we'll see. I will initiate whatever kind of contact we can make to see if we can get them to come back around to our meetings, at least periodically, and have discussions. All right. Well, thank you for bringing that one to our attention. I found out what I could about that specific issue, but not much new there. Last on the agenda are updates that are included. Were there any that came through Greenworks? And oh, there were not.
I was just thinking they'd provide a verbal update since nothing was sent to me prior.
Got it. Well, Dawn isn't here to provide an update for Greenworks, but they do keep their website up to date on projects and events going on. The Tree Protection Task Force did meet last week. The primary, and Ed can cover this, we had a presentation from Kudzu Culture and their work on kudzu. I don't know if he's able to. But that update can come if you have any more. Nancy?
I was going to say, this is not actually from Greenworks, but from I met with Eric this morning, and we are working on putting together an on-site training for staff and potentially contractors and design professionals, maybe a little hybrid in office, in the field training with them on tree protection ordinance. So like in the field, how does it work? Bad situations, good situations, that sort of stuff. So
good. Perfect. Thank you. All right. Anything else, Ed? I don't know. Get any updates otherwise from Tree Protection Task Force? No. Okay. Then now we have our information on the closed session. So I'll read this and then we'll need a motion and a second. So closed session to consult with an attorney employed or retained by the public body in order to preserve the attorney-client privilege between the attorney and the public body as allowed by NCGS General Statute 143.318.11A3. So if we have a motion, we'll enter closed session.
So move.
And a second?
I move into closed session.
Oh, okay. I got Patrick as a motion and Sharon as the second. So we just need to vote on this. And then once we vote, we will exit this room. And you should have a link in your email to join a new room for the closed session. So, Ed?
Aye.
Sharon?
Aye.
Zoe?
Aye.
Perrin?
Aye.
Patrick?
Aye.
And I vote aye. So, see you later in the closed session.